Hello, and welcome to the first episode of The Road to Not Giving a Fuck, a sort of self-help podcast that will hopefully give you some guidance to try and help you navigate this thing called life. Along with getting advice from myself, I also invite my friends to come and chat with me and talk life, and maybe help my friends too if they are going through tough times. Sit back, relax, roll one up for me, and enjoy the show. With this podcast, all I simply want to do is be able to sit down, talking about some of the experiences I've had with my life, and hopefully in a way, if anybody can connect with anything that I've talked about in this podcast and they take something from it, that's ultimately the only thing that matters to me when it comes to this podcast. Is I want to be able to help people be able to be comfortable in their own skin, go out into the world and say, I'm perfectly okay with who I am, what my beliefs are, what I believe in, what I don't believe in, and be able to go out confidently and, in a way, not be afraid of who they want to be in life. And so with this first episode, since I haven't really asked anybody to be on the show, it's just going to be a solo episode for me. And as anybody is probably watching or listening to right now, if you're watching this on YouTube, if I make the YouTube channel for it, cool. You're just looking at a, I guess, somewhat logo of it in a way, but at the same time, you're probably just looking at a picture of it because I really don't know what I'm going to put for the picture. So this first episode is going to be titled Wrestling because I am a very big wrestling nerd. That's been something that I've grown up with for the longest time. I stopped watching it for a while because I would get a little too aggressive with it and want to get into it. And eventually my parents were like, oh, you can't watch it anymore. And they barred me from it. And eventually got to a point to where it was like, I want to get back into it. I want to watch it again because I fucking loved it. So I guess we'll have to start with my earliest recollection of watching wrestling. So I was a wee baby lad. I was born in the dead heat of summer in 1998. The day after I was born was also the day that a specific Adam Copeland, if you don't know who Adam Copeland is, that is the now world famous Edge. He had made his wrestling debut, and I can't remember who he fought. I would have to go back and look at it. But I think if I remember correctly, on his debut, he accidentally injured somebody. Or it was a week or two after he debuted, and he had felt so bad for it. He didn't mean to hurt him or anything like that, and that all happened. So I was literally a day old, and the next day, Adam Edge debuted in the fucking WWF. A week later, this is when the King of the Ring 1998 happened. Now, if nobody knows what the King of the Ring 1998 is, I would recommend, if you have Peacock, go find it, go watch it. You will know what match I'm about to talk about right now. It is the world famous Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and Mankind. This was one of those big pivotal moments that I feel in the wrestling world, besides WrestleMania, 14, 15, when they had Shawn Michaels versus Steve Austin for the world title and the main event. I believe it was WrestleMania 15. I think it was 15. So they had Austin with the title. They gave him the title at WrestleMania 15, and this was when Shawn Michaels was starting to depart from the wrestling scene because his back was hurt and he had quote-unquote lost his smile, and he decided to leave. With that, I don't blame him one bit for it. I feel as though taking care of your health is a very important thing in life, and I feel as though going back to what I talked about in the beginning, in the trailer of the podcast, I would like to take a lot of those experiences and shit and be able to incorporate it into real life so that hopefully if anybody listens to it, they can take something from it and use it to their own practices or their own ways and be able to get something out of it a bit more and be able to take it with them for the rest of their lives and eventually spread that to the next generation. So Austin had just taken the title, However, as I was watching the build for all that up to the King of the Ring 1998, it was really such a weird. It was a bit of a weird build up for it because they had just thrown some of the most random names in there. God, who'd they put in there? I know Dan the Beast Severn was in there at least because he fought The Rock. Yeah, he fought The Rock, and then that's when eventually, during that time, they were trying to actually build Ken Shamrock for the title. Towards the end, at like what was this, Survivor Series '98, I think, was when they were trying to put that title on him, and it was just such an interesting time. But at the same time, I going back and watching it, I just realized it was all just nothing but a big fucking party. All right, now King of the Ring 1998, Hell in a Cell. It was such a random. It was a bit of a random, like, just out of the blue, rode up match. And going back and listening to all the backstory about it, Terry Funk and Mick Foley were sitting there and they were like, how can we top Bad Blood 97? Which Bad Blood 97 coincidentally took place in my hometown of St. Louis. And unfortunately, that was the same day that we had all found out that Brian Pillman had unfortunately passed away in his hotel room. Rest in peace to one of the... I swear, if Brian Pillman would have made it in the Attitude Era, he would have been one of the brightest stars in that company. And I don't think it would have taken away from guys like Steve Austin, because guys like Steve Austin and Brian Pillman shared such a good... They both had established their own identities as being just loose cannons with everything. Brian Pillman especially, because he was literally dubbed the loose cannon. And then eventually Steve Austin would like kind of take that a bit more to the next step and just straight up go against authority and look authority figures in the eyes and tell them, yeah, I'm going to do what I want. You guys can go fuck yourselves. And if you guys have an issue with it, you're going to wind up getting an ass kicking for it. So, with all that being said, Mick Foley and Terry Funk were sitting down watching the first ever Hell in a Cell match between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker at Bad Blood, and they were thinking to themselves, especially Mick Foley, he was thinking, man, how can I take this to the next level? How can I make this... How can we raise the bar a bit more for this massive structure to where, like, I've never seen the Hell in a Cell in, like, IRL. I've never, like, been near it. I've never seen it. But like watching all the different Hell in a Cell matches that I've seen, that thing has got to be huge as hell. And I mean, I couldn't imagine taking a bump off of that. And it looks horrifying. So going to King of the Ring 1998, everybody was trying to figure out, how can we make this bigger? How can we make this better? And so we'd let Mankind go out first. I believe Mankind went out first. Yeah, he did. He came out first and was walking to the ring, and he was like, getting up there, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to climb up there. So he climbs up to the top of the cell. Undertaker's coming up, making his entrance, and around this time, I believe he had actually broke his ankle and was basically walking around on like a busted fucking tire. And so you're even watching his entrance too, and you can definitely tell that he's struggling to walk and being able to, like, it's not like a massive struggle, but I mean, like, internally he's probably like, man, this fucking hurts so goddamn bad. Like, I just, like, I couldn't imagine the pain that he was going through. So get to the start of the match, and they just climb up to the top of the cell, and they're fighting up there for... It was like 2 to 3 minutes that they just started, like, nailing each other with, like, Hail Marys and just beating the absolute hell out of each other. And then the famous sight that I think everybody will forever remember when it comes to that Hell in a Cell match, when Undertaker just literally took Mick Foley, a human being, and just said, yeah, let's just throw you off the top of the cell. And so yucked him off the cell. slammed through the table, and had he landed like a couple inches to the right, we would have been telling a different story today. And, it goes back to the fact of he didn't get it right. It doesn't go to the fact of he didn't get it wrong. It was more the fact that he was willing, by he I mean Mick Foley, he was willing to let somebody take him, throw him off a 20-foot structure. Again, never seen it in real life, but a 20-foot structure, that's a pretty high height. 20 feet. Threw him, launched him into space, slammed through a table, and as soon as that happened, where were they? They were in Philadelphia? I think they were in Philadelphia. I mean, everybody in that arena just lost their goddamn mind over it. And I don't blame any of them, because that was such a massive fucking bump. It got to a point to where they started lifting the cell with Undertaker on top. Now, keep in mind, as these two were fighting and before Undertaker threw Foley off, they had this whole fucking thing tied together with goddamn zip ties, okay? They had them tied together with zip ties. And you're literally, like, as you're watching the match, you're seeing these little, like, white things break off from the cell and just ting off of the cell. So it's like this thing is haphazardly made for this match. For two big men like The Undertaker and Mick Foley, I couldn't imagine how terrified they were, because, again, you're up there and this thing is barely held together, and, in about 30 seconds to a minute, you're about to take a man, throw him off this 20-foot structure, and you just hope that he lands on that table. So he lands on the table, and I mean, everybody's just rushing out there to check on him. And I mean, yeah, you would too. This is when he, like, discombobulated himself, and I believe this is when, like, when he fell, one of Foley's teeth shot through his fucking gums right into his nose. And I mean, it was something else. No. I think that was before. So they lifted the cell. He's going through. Everybody's taking him back. And I mean, he is legit. He's fucked up. Taker's standing up there. He's like, yeah, I kind of did this thing where it's like I threw a guy off a cell. What am I going to do now? And about 5 minutes later, you hear this commotion and everybody's starting to cheer and shit. And you're like, wait, what's going on? As Foley is getting up from the goddamn stretcher, the cell's back down. He decides, yeah, I want to go back up for round 2. So he climbs back up for round 2. And this second one, oh my god, the fact that I know what I know now. So the second bump that he took when he went through the cell was not supposed to happen. That was one of those where it's like, it was like a freak thing that happened. The cell wasn't supposed to break. And I mean, just watching the man fly through the cell and then just watching his body bounce off the hard ass ring. Yeah, it was something else. And I mean, I think that was about the point to when he fell, one of his teeth lodged up through his nose. And I mean, Foley was a bloody mess. Taker was not, feeling great. And so as they're going through the match and that all happens, Taker thinks to himself, I think I just killed a man. I don't know what I'm going to do at this point. I just got this job. I've been here for about 10 years. Oh, no, he was in there for like 8. Because he debuted at Survivor Series 1990. So he was in there for almost 8 years. So he was in there for about almost 8 years. It was like 7 3/4 of a year. 7 years about, 6? 8, 9, 10. 7 years, about 5 months. 5 or 6 months. 5. Yeah. Math. Hard. So he's standing up there and thinking to himself, I just killed a man. And he's trying to communicate to everybody, make sure he's breathing. Make sure he's alive. And he's telling all these, he's like basically trying to be like a ring general with everything. And he's talking to Terry Funk. which is Mick Foley's best friend, and he's like, make sure he's good, and just trying to make sure this thing kept moving the way it was supposed to go. And this is the other thing too. I thought this was a long ass match that they had. No, this was like a 15-minute match. It was like 10-15 minutes. And I'm like, all of that action in 10 to 15 minutes. And that's one of those matches where it's like, if you watch it and you're a guy, you're somebody, not just a guy, this is for anybody. This is for anybody that wants to get into wrestling and they see things like that, and it's so awe-inspiring, because you're watching all this carnage going on, and then you think to yourself, like, besides being chucked off a cell, like, imagine I can do something like that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that will forever be one of those matches that is forever cemented into me. Because, again, if I was to give like a top 5 list of all time right now, number 1 is definitely The Undertaker. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if, people are like, oh, he didn't put people over, blah, blah. It's like, no. He's done so fucking much of the business that it just, you can't discredit The Undertaker or Mark Calloway in that sense whatsoever, because, I mean, again, the man had a career that lasted for 30 years. He, honestly, I don't even think he ever really took any substantial time off when he was a full-time wrestler. Like, he made sure he kept himself in shape. He made sure he was always good to go for anything. And that's one of the things that I do thoroughly enjoy about The Undertaker, is that he was always ready to go. He always had something good planned out. And, I mean, even then, when he had the really shit ideas given to him, he did everything that he could to make sure that no matter what, he did his part in the end and tried to do everything that he could to eventually start putting other people over. I just wish that, like, it would have been done in I don't know. Like, the only one that I take a lot of umbrage with was when him and Bray Wyatt had their feud at WrestleMania 31. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think that needed to happen, because when you look at it from that perspective, Bray Wyatt during that time needed a win. He needed something, anything, to get his Eater of Worlds character, to give him a bit more traction, to make him seem like a posable threat, to basically make it in a way kind of like he was the next spiritual, like, Undertaker in a way, but not with that Undertaker name. He had his own thing created to where it's like he created like a cult, and he wanted everybody to follow him, and just, I didn't care. I was one of those people to where it's like, I wanted him to get that win all the fucking time, because I am a firm believer in guys like Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda, whatever you know him by. And that's words. Bray Wyatt is definitely one of those where it's like, as of right now, if I had to pick people for, like, in times of right now, Bray Wyatt's probably my number 1 on that list, because I think about it and I related with him so much, because what was it, 2020, 2021, when he ultimately got released from the company because of quote-unquote budget cuts. But if any of you wrestling fans are out there listening to this, you know that's a big pile of bullshit, because a lot of the shit that's came out with the whole Vince McMahon sex scandal and everything, it's one of those where it's like, everybody that got released from the company, it was literally because of Vince McMahon's, actions behind the scenes, how he was treating women, etc., etc. So, I respect the fuck out of Bray Wyatt, because I always think about it from this perspective. The fact that he was literally one of the biggest. He was their number one merchandise seller in the WWE. He was literally drawing so much fucking money for this company because of his characters and all of his creations that he had and everything that he believed in. And he still got released from the company because Vince McMahon wanted to label him as difficult to work with. And I relate with that so much because, now this is going into the bit to where it's like I try to give a little bit of advice and give a little bit of how I relate to it, because a while back I was working at a company that I was welding for at the time. And for about 6 months when I started there, I was literally being told, oh, you know, we're about done with your booth. We're about done with your booth. And I would wait for weeks and months till it got done. When I first started working there, they literally had the welder playing machinist just because they weren't prepared to have the welder come in, you know, and be ready to go to start welding. And I'd gotten annoyed because I was like, you know, you're kidding me. You're going to literally let me do all this other bullshit besides what I went to school for, when I told you I'm good at what I do. And I finished up playing machinist, then they had me shooting studs, which eventually I got really sick of that one because it's like, dude, I'm literally over here working like a mule. And it's like, you still don't have my booth done. And I'd gotten annoyed. And I was like, dude, I was talking to my supervisor and I'm like, dude, when's it going to be done? He's like, oh, we're about done with it. And just started blowing smoke up my ass with it. So they had finally gotten the booth done. All they really needed was to get a new welder. And I was initially told, oh, you know, we'll probably give you the new welder so you can test it out, try it out, see how you like it. And then, you know, if you like it, we can maybe start getting new welders in. Well, then eventually the maintenance guy looked at me. He's like, oh, like hell you're getting it. We're just going to give you the old one. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. Not like I was like pissed off that I got the old welder. I didn't really give a fuck what welder they gave me. But it was more the fact that I was basically told, you know, oh, I don't, you know, it was almost like any input that I really was able to have was just thrown out the fucking window, and I got told, yeah, I don't really give a fuck about what you think. And so right then and there, I started thinking to myself, okay, I probably shouldn't be here forever, because if I'm going to be over here busting my ass off, and, you know, there'd be other people that, like, would literally not do a fucking thing, or half-ass their jobs, or whatever, or, you know, milk everything out because they wanted to. But yet, a guy like me, who, at the time, I was 22, going on 23, I think. Yeah, I was 22, going on to 23, because I was 21. I'd started thinking to myself, all right, I shouldn't be here forever. You know, I can be here for a little bit, get a little bit of experience, but after I get a little bit of that experience and figure out what, you know, is up with this place, I need to get out. Because it was, I mean, and I learned fucking hard. And it had gotten to the point to where I was, you know, I'd finally started welding, because I looked at my boss and I was like, dude, if you're not going to have me weld and you're going to waste my time, you need to let me know so I can go look for something else. And so eventually he was like, all right, you want to weld? You know, there you go. So I almost had to start taking opportunities for myself and basically explain to people, if you're going to waste my time, I'm not going to be here anymore. I know, like, I'd started learning my worth after I had left a lumber yard that I was working for, and that job, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I walked out. So if you ever feel like you need to walk away from something, which I've had to do twice now, if you ever feel like you need to walk away from something because it is literally destroying the fuck out of you, do it. That will be one of the greatest things that you could possibly do for yourself. Now, are you going to struggle a little bit when you make those decisions and you kind of don't have anything planned out? Absolutely, you're going to struggle. I don't think anybody's going to go to the grave without having a struggle. If anybody says they haven't struggled in their life and everything was perfect, they are absolutely lying through their fucking teeth, and you don't need to listen to those people. So, after I left the lumberyard, that was when I went to my welding job. And then eventually, as I was at the welding job, I learned, okay, I don't need to be here forever. I need to, again, figure out why the fuck this place is so shit, and I need to get out as quick as possible. So, as I was working a bit more, doing their welding and shit, and it started getting to the point to where the supervisor and one of the more tenured guys that was like literally his best friend, they started coming to my booth and basically telling me how to do my job, how to weld, and blah blah blah. And I looked at both of them, and it's like, you really think I'm going to take advice from people who literally press a fucking button just to do their job, and the other guy just literally stands at the computer taking phone calls and shit? It's like, you really think I'm going to take advice from you two when I spent 3 years of my life in college learning how to weld, getting good at my craft, and eventually being able to take my learnings and teachings that I had gotten from people that, again, I spent 3 years of my life going and doing, literally working a 9 to 5 in the morning, and then going that night in the college 6 to 10. So I was literally busting my ass off for 3 years, half my day being gone, and then by the time I get home, I literally just go to bed and did it all again. And I did that for 3 years. I had gotten my certificate. I'm literally one class away from an associate's. So if you're in college right now and you think, you're at the end, and if you're really seriously thinking about dropping out because you think it's hard and you're at the end, don't. Because you're literally right there. You may as well go and do it, and then eventually go out into the world, give it a try. If you don't like it, you have plenty of time to go back, and find something else that you want to go do, and, or find something new that you want to try, and start getting into it, asking people for advice about things, hey, what do you do about this? What do you do about that? And I think that definitely helps in the end when you open up your horizons and open up and, see, okay, this didn't work out. What else can I go try to maybe see, what I can do in order to be happy with myself? And I'd worked at that job for a while, and I had gotten to the point to where I was burnt out on welding. I didn't want to do it anymore. And in another part of my mind, I knew for a fact that I wasn't going to let them, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of telling them I quit. Because they had pissed me off so bad. I was so frustrated because, again, I was literally being told how to do my job, but they wouldn't do that with anybody else because they had been there for so long. And it's like, why? Why people feel as though they need to make everybody else's lives so much fucking hell, I don't know. Because, again, anything that I welded or did or created, none of it ever broke. I don't think I ever got a complaint about anything breaking whatsoever. If it did, I would take care of it in an instant and be like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever, I'll take care of it. But just the fact that I was being told how to weld when it's like, no, I can go a different way of it and still get the same fucking result of no matter what, it ain't gonna fucking break. And then on top of that, letting other people basically do whatever the fuck they wanted to do. And again, they would always watch me like a hawk and make sure I was doing my job. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to do my fucking job. Just let me do my job. Don't bother me, and we won't have any issues. So, get to about September, and this is when me and management started like really butting heads so hard, to the point to where it was like, I was literally looking at people at work and I was like, I hope they fire me. I want to get fired because I don't want to give them that satisfaction to telling them I quit and walking out. Which eventually they sort of got that mindset of, oh, I just quit. When it was like, no, like I had to leave. Like maybe I had an emergency that happened. But eventually it got to a point to where I had applied for another job. And what I didn't know is that the place that I went and applied to, what worked with the company that I was working with at the time. So they bought material from where I was working to do their jobs. And so there was a day to where me and the supervisors got into it because nobody wanted to communicate anything. That was another big issue with that place too, was communication was absolutely fucking dog shit. And I that drove me more and more away from the company. It drove me more and more to like start thinking about myself, because at that point I had realized it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I say. Everybody's going to have a fucking issue with anything I do, anything I say, how I do things, etc., etc. Somebody's going to have an issue with it. And that drove me to the point to where I started getting way more into wrestling. And I was literally sitting there in my booth with like my earbuds in, not listening to anybody else in the fucking world, doing my own thing. And I had started listening to wrestling, and then that's when I thought to myself, I was like, what if I decided one day I didn't want to weld anymore and I wanted to actually get into the wrestling business? What if I said fuck all to work for anybody else like that, in that sense, and I started my own brand, my own thing. I started watching it more and more and more, and then eventually I started dreaming about it. One of the main vivid dreams that I have of it that drove me to the point of, yes, I don't want to weld anymore. I don't want to be in the construction business anymore. Now, I mean, I'll be in it to make money and shit, but do I want to do it full time anymore? No, I don't, because it like working for all those different places drove me to the point of, again, doesn't matter what I do, doesn't matter what I say, people are still going to have fucking issues with me. So it's like, why not take my own fucking issues that I have, quote unquote, and turn it into something to where I make it so successful and so just I wanted to get it to where I wasn't working for anybody else. I was my own boss. I basically, was able to, shape my destiny. And so as I listened to wrestling a bit more and got into it, I was like, I want to do it. The vivid dream that I have of it was I was main eventing an AEW pay-per-view. Now that we're talking about it, I wanted to, I was main eventing a pay-per-view or something. And coincidentally, I was facing one of the people that, again, I look up to a lot, and that is Chris Jericho. And I was like, we were getting into it. And from what I remember, the crowd was just losing their fucking mind over it. We were just tearing down the house. I don't know where we were. We were somewhere. And, just tearing down the house, having this, 5-star match that Dave Meltzer would have probably gave it, or he probably would have, short of me on it and give it a 4.5 stars, just to do that. And so when I woke up the next morning and I realized, I have to go to work, I laid there and I started crying a little bit, and I was like, damn, that's what I want to do. Because I remember the crowd chanting, this is awesome, fight forever, and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I want to do something to where, I get that reaction. I want to get that energy. And, from that day on, I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to be a welder anymore. I'll do it on the side, but do I want to do it full time anymore? No, because again, I would work so fucking hard at it, and I would bust my ass off, and I would perfect my craft on it. But again, other people had something to say about it, and it had gotten to points where it's like, then why should I keep coming in and working for you guys? I remember a conversation that me and my supervisor's right hand had. He looked at me and he's like, oh, why do you gotta bitch about everything? I'm like, because it's my job. Because I fucking care. And if you don't fucking realize it, I looked at him and I'm like, why the fuck am I still showing up? He's like, well, I don't know. Why are you? I'm like, only reason why I'm still fucking here is because I need the money. Otherwise, I would have been gone a long time ago. And so, I think the main lesson out of that is when you realize your self-worth and you are worth so much more than what you're being given, and nobody will give you any opportunity to show your work or show your craft or be able to appreciate, okay, man, you did a really good job on this. These look really fucking good. But they always want to find that one thing to nitpick on, and then eventually it starts stacking on and on and on, and they do way more nitpicking than giving good praise. That's when it gets to the point of they burn you out, they beat the fuck out of you, and then you don't want to do it anymore. So, in turn, going back to initially what I said, that's one of the main reasons as to why Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda is one of those biggest influences for me right now, because he was literally one of their biggest product movers. And I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, but it all comes back to the same lesson. He was literally one of WWE's biggest product movers, and Vince still released him because he wanted to make Wyndham Rotunda feel like he was hard to work with. And from what I heard, apparently Vince McMahon would slap him for just no fucking reason for it, just because he wanted to, just because he had that power to do so, or he was just so egotistical and wanted to make everything about him, and he didn't care what anybody else had thought, and he just wanted what Vince McMahon wanted. And I'm not meaning to slander anybody by any means whatsoever when I say any of this stuff, but these are all facts that have happened. For the most part, I really don't know if Wyndham Rotunda was actually slapped by Vince McMahon, but if he was, it's like, dude, why are you being so fucking disrespectful? That's the thing. When the older generation is just beating the fuck out of the younger generation and basically making them feel like shit for getting good at something that they wanted to learn and wanted to rip everything about them out and basically replace them with a robot or something, you're basically killing an industry when you do things like that. When you shit talk on all the younger kids who are simply just trying to make it through life. And at the end of the day, some of those people, it really fucking sticks with them. And I personally don't care for it, because again, you're taking these younger kids who all they want to do is learn. And the other thing too is all they want to do is just to simply have fun with what they do. And it's like people don't want to have fun anymore. And so it kind of takes away from it. And then eventually, that's how it eventually just turns into a job of just, oh, I have to do this every day, blah, blah, blah. That's one of the main things I don't understand is why they feel like they need to tear everybody down, replace them with something that they're not, and just eventually take away any fucking identity that person has, because we're all each individual people. We all have our own, taste in things. But I feel like when you start to shove your own opinions down somebody else's throat and basically make them believe what you believe, it's one of the most toxic things that I think we as human beings could ever face, is when people shove whatever thoughts they have down our throats to try to make us believe that it's true. And I think and that's the only reason why people get pissed off, when people are like, no, I'm going to do things how I know how to do it. And if you have an issue with it, you can go fuck yourself with it. Those are the people that I feel in this, in the next generations to come, in the next, few years, the next several years, or even tomorrow. I mean, fuck, it's probably happening right now. You're probably sitting there in that same position that I was in and thinking to yourself, yeah, I know I'm a good worker. I know I'm worth more than what I'm being given, and nobody's going to give me the opportunity that I want. So it brings you to a point to where you have to eventually take a little bit of the role of being the bad guy, of kind of looking like the bad guy in a little bit to other people, but you internally know for a fact that everything you did, you feel as though was justified, you feel like it was right. And again, at the end of the day, you're really you're betting on yourself a lot more. And when people start betting on themselves so much more, I feel like ultimately people, will start to feel so much better with themselves, because it's like, I'm not taking shit from anybody anymore. And that's where I feel as though, again, people like that are going to go so fucking far in life. And those will be the people that eventually, everybody will, again, start to look up to and be like, okay, he's got good morals. He's got a good mindset on things. He knows what he's doing. He's kind of like basically taking life by the balls and said, yeah, I'm going to do what I want to do. And if you don't like it, again, you can go fuck yourself. And so that's where eventually, I guess, in a way, the name of the podcast came around, The Road to Not Giving a Fuck. Again, if anybody was to listen to this and take anything from it, and, anybody learns from this podcast, from whatever the fuck I ever say, I truly, genuinely feel like anybody that bets on themselves will get far in life. At the end of the day, when you truly do bet on yourself and you're not letting other people dictate how you feel, what you should feel, how to do things, when you stop listening to those people that make you doubt yourself on everything, and then eventually you're like, no, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do things how I feel like it should be done. And then when you come back from it all being so much more successful than where you were before, that's where I feel like a lot of people will start to learn and eventually become a better individual than what they were before. And eventually, when you start to get that positive energy in yourself and you're starting to put more into yourself and start focusing on your own things, you get this sense of like, damn, everybody that told me I couldn't do this, everybody that told me I couldn't do that, I need to do this, I need to do that, you'll never make it doing this, you'll never make it doing that. When all those people get to literally sit, like, see you one day and think to themselves, man, that guy that we told he couldn't do anything with his life, whatever, that, he should have done this, he should have done that. And then they look at you and think, wow, he's doing good. And I feel like when you ultimately get that reaction from anybody that's ever put any doubt into you and basically tried to talk you down from doing anything, and you don't listen to anybody else but yourself, that is where ultimately I feel like the future generations will definitely succeed in life. And it just, at the end of the day, creates such a positive energy that, like, once you start sharing your positive energy because you're feeling better with yourself, because you're betting on yourself, you're basically going all in saying, I can do this. I'm not going to let anybody tell me otherwise. And I'm going to say fuck all to what anybody says. That is, and you know, you start to share your positivity with everybody, and then you start sharing ideas with everybody, and just being nicer human beings is ultimately the end goal that I want to share with this podcast. Till the day I fucking die. Till the day that they put me in the ground, 6 feet under, or if I'm fucking cremated, I don't give a fuck. I do not give a fuck. I want to make this podcast to where not only people truly do feel good about themselves after listening to it, you know, listening to like an hour of me just ranting about either stupid shit or me and my friend just sitting down acting like fucking idiots for like an hour just talking about life, what we've been up to, you know, what things have been going on, what we want to talk about. All I simply want for anybody that ever listens to this, male or female, and I guess we'll probably cover that in another episode because I've been recording for like 45 minutes. I really didn't know how long I was going to record this first episode, but kind of got into a little bit of tangents, which I like because I get to talk about how I feel about things, you know, specific things that like I look to in order to get a little bit of inspiration from myself, and then eventually taking some of those things that I've watched or learned or whatever, applying it to myself, and basically getting a better plant on the ground as far as like life goes. And I want to give anybody and everybody the utmost confidence and potential in everybody to look at themselves and think to themselves, I can fucking do it. And if that does ever happen, and if one of these days, like, if anybody's listening to it and I see him in a meet or greet or whatever, it does not fucking matter what I'm doing. If I'm out with family or something, don't bother me when I'm with family. That's one of the weirdest things ever. Or my friends. Like, if I'm hanging out with like my friends or family, it's like, okay, that's kind of like my time to get away from everything. But I will say, if anybody did ever get anything from the podcast, and they've taken some of anything that I've told them and applied it into their life, and I ever did get the opportunity to hear about it, and people are like, you've really helped me through a lot. I think once things like that start happening, I definitely know that I've made an impact on the world. And I think that ultimately came to what I eventually told my mom. I looked at her in the eyes one night, and I looked at her and I was like, I don't want to, you know, be just another cog in a machine or something like that. I don't want to just be another employee at a company. I want my life to mean something, and I want to make sure that I do anything and everything that I can in order to, whenever again I'm put in the fucking ground and I'm done on this earth, I want to make sure that I leave that impact on the world, and that, again, people in the future do talk about, oh yeah, I learned from him. You know, he taught me a couple things in life. As long as I know that I did something good, that's truly genuinely all that matters to me. And, you know, again, that wasn't my mindset like 2 to 3 years ago. 2 to 3 years ago, I was a piece of shit, and quite honestly, I needed my ass kicked for it. And I've kind of gotten to the point to where, you know, I had terrible things happen to me, and you know, I had gotten what I'd rightfully deserved. But as I started looking at it and thinking to myself how much of a piece of shit I was, and then eventually changing how I thought about things, you know, what I viewed on what, and how I view people, and etc., etc. When I became a more open person to things, and, you know, I'm much more nicer to as many people as I can. And one of the other major things that I don't ever do either is I don't ever disparage on anybody whatsoever, whether they're, you know, a rich motherfucker or if they are broke as shit on food stamps or anything whatsoever. I'm one of those people to where it's like I never, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for on that, but I never Um, I never disparage against it because, people will fall on the hard times and sometimes have to rely on things. But the one thing that I really do not care for in life is when other people want to shit talk people that, actually genuinely need the help because, something happened and they just, things started happening like job loss or they got injured or something like that, whatever the situation may be. I hate the fact that there are some people out there that are willing to talk so much shit on those people and be like, oh, I have to work to support them on the welfare and blah, blah, blah. And I look at people that do that and I'm like, why though? I'm like, what if it was you in that position? What if you were the one that needed the support and other people were talking shit on you? Would you like it? And I feel like that's where a lot of people really don't look at it, is they don't look at it from the perspective of what if I was in that position? And I mean, I'll be honest, I was in that position for a little bit too when I, got fired from the welding job. And I was struggling a little bit. And what happened was that I actually legit applied for food stamps. My dad came down and busted. He came through my door. He didn't bust down through it. I opened it. And there was a letter that I had gotten from the place. I can't think of the name of it. But he came in and he yells at me and he goes, "You got a secret, baby, I don't know about?" I looked at him, I was like, "The fuck are you talking about?" He's like, "This," and he throws it at my chest, and I'm like, that's probably for food stamps. And he got really pissy with me, and I'm like, are you fucking serious? I'm like, you're really gonna get pissed over the fact that like I had to apply for food stamps because I was broke as shit, just barely scraping by because my welding job decided to fire me because I wanted to do better for myself. And I feel like they didn't like that I was trying to do better for myself going for their competition or for people that they work with. I honestly feel like that's why I got fired. And the fact that he got pissed and threw that at me, it pissed me off a bit more because it's like, again, I'm just struggling over here trying to do whatever I can. And you want to throw this shit in my face and be a fucking dick about it. And quite honestly, I really don't care if I call my dad out on anything on this podcast. But it annoyed me a bit that, I was literally trying to do anything I can in order just to simply survive. Like, at that point, I was broke as shit. I was barely eating anything. Like, I was not eating at all. I was literally just, like, drinking a shit ton of water. I would come home from work, and I would just go to bed immediately. Like, I would be out the rest of the night. I wouldn't text anybody. I wouldn't call anybody. Nothing. I would get home, maybe be up for, like, a couple hours, and then pass out because I had no fucking food in my system. I was just fucking empty. And the fact that, like, I had tried to apply for this, and again, my dad had gotten pissed off at me for it, it really hurt in a way. And that's probably honestly one of those things that, like, I'll never forget, because it's like, your son's over here struggling and you want to get pissed over the fact that he's trying to, just to simply make sure that he survives, and you're going to get pissed about it and be a dick about it and throw that shit in my face. That's where eventually, again, and I know I say eventually a million times, but, bear with me on it. I'm trying to get better at speaking and talking. At the end of the day, that was when I started to resent my dad a bit more, which, again, probably get into it in other episodes of the podcast, but it was just the fact that, like, he was literally watching his son struggle and he was trying to do anything that he could, and he wanted to pull that shit. And so that's where a lot of my resentment comes from with my dad. And yeah, it kind of fucked with me a bit. But eventually I learned that I really didn't give a fuck what he said anymore. He could have told me whatever, and I still won't listen to him. Just simply because of the fact that, like, I he fell into that same pit. He never wanted to dig himself out of it. And at the end of the day, he just started trying to teach me what he was doing, and I didn't want it. And I guess in a way he resents me a bit for it, because I'm over here trying to do my own thing. And I feel as though he's a bit jealous over the fact that I'm over here, exploring things that I like, things that I want to do with my life. And the fact that I guess in a way he didn't get to do it or whatever. And he just wants to, tear me down on everything. And again, that's where I resent my dad quite a bit with it. Yeah. It hurt. It still hurts to this day. Again, this will probably be for another episode or something like that, but I don't know. That's a bit of a touchy subject for me right now. I've kind of chipped the ice on it a little bit. You guys generally know what my situation is with like my dad. My mom, I have a great relationship with, and she's been so much more supportive than a little bit before. There'd be times where like she would kind of question a couple things I did, but eventually she was like, I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy with what you do in life. And I had opened up to her one night, and I told her about how I felt about everything that was going on in my life. And yeah, so I really don't know if I can get into like anything else, wrestling wise, or anything in general, because I mean I've been talking for about an hour. Just explaining, where I come from with shit, and, getting a little bit into like the first episode, it'll be rough, but hopefully I can get better at it. And, as I start to get people on the show, I can do a bit more of like flipping the roles a bit more, of being a bit more like maybe a 70-30, 80-20. Like if I have people on, I would much rather be asking people questions than giving my, whatever on things. But with all that being said, I think that's about where I'm going to wrap up this first episode of the podcast. I'm glad I kind of got to sit down a little bit, talk about wrestling a little bit, why I like it, why I enjoy it, and some of those people that have really inspired me to get into wrestling. Some of those people that I've watched their journey of what they went through, and it's like I related to that so much, and I'm able to now sit down and talk about how I relate to it so much. And it'd be just fucking sick if one of these days, Wyndham Rotunda or Mark Calloway sat down and listened to this podcast, and they're like, man, this kid really likes what we did and shit. And Wyndham is like, man, he got inspired from what happened to me. It was nice to sit down and talk about it for a while, and then eventually kind of transition, a little bit into what I took from some of my life experiences, how that related to like with wrestling and shit, and being able to eventually bring it all together of, why I wanted to do the podcast, why I want to do everything that I want to do in my life before I die, and everything in between. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end this first episode here. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Road to Not Giving a Fuck podcast, episode 1, which is basically titled Wrestling and, stuff. So, if you guys like this podcast, be sure to give it a like. I really got no clue where this is going to be. If I could post it on Spotify, great, cool. Otherwise, this is probably going on YouTube, on a second channel for myself. If you do like the podcast, give it a like. If you're new to the podcast, please be sure to subscribe to it so you don't miss any future episodes of this podcast, because honestly, I enjoy this. I enjoy sitting down and talking for a while and giving my inputs on things. Do be sure to go check out the YouTube channel at Cult Revolve. Go follow me on the socials. I will try to put everything together as much as I can, as far as like making sure, I have everything up blah, blah, blah. You know the deal. I would like to try to do this as as a weekly thing. If I miss a week too, bear with me on it. You know, more likely next episode that you get, it would be a bit more. But since this is the first episode, I really didn't have a whole lot to think about. I was just out for a bit, and I was like, all right, you know, what can I do for the podcast? What can I talk about? And just kind of structuring it as I was out running a couple errands real quick. So, thank you guys so much for listening to the first episode of, again, The Road to Not Giving a Fuck. And I hope you guys, you know, have taken something from this. If you did, let me know. Tweet it to me, email me. If you want to send a carrier pigeon, send the carrier pigeon. 9 times out of 10, I will probably send back the carrier pigeon dead. So, thank you guys so much for listening to this first episode. And I hope to catch you all in the next episode. Take care, everyone.